Hey, how are you today? This is Josh Patrick, and you're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. And my guest today is Andrew. And gosh, I don't have your last name, Andrew. This is really
Pace.
horrible. Andrew Pace.
That's
Thank
it.
you. Thank you. And Andrew is an expert in green construction. So that's what we're going to talk about today. For all you subcontractors and contractors out there, this is a conversation I think you really need to know about. I live in Vermont, which most of you probably know by now if you've been listening for a while. And Vermont is one of the leaders in green stuff. And we'll have Andrew help us learn why green construction and green contracting is really important for you. So instead of me yammering now, let's bring Andrew on. Hey, Andrew, how are you today?
I am wonderful today. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. So first of all, let's get a definition of what green construction is, because I think there's about 150 of them.
That's a great way of putting it. And so green construction can be a whole host of things depending on the person, the contractor, what have you. And essentially what green means is anywhere from being sustainable, human friendly, energy efficient, and a whole host of subcategories to that. So years ago, I actually developed my own rating system called Degree of Green, which allows consumers and professionals to choose what they mean when they talk about green. I think our industry, the construction industry, has really wrapped around one major description, which is energy efficiency and global environmental concerns.
Okay, so can you talk a bit about what that scale is and how it might be used?
Sure. So the idea of when I got into the business 20 almost 30 years ago, and 30 years ago, green wasn't even more than a color. And so in the industry, the term green sort of came up as being eco-friendly.
Hmm.
And my clients, and I work with mostly homeowners who are building and remodeling, but I have a lot of contractors across the country I work with. They're looking for a level of green that is different than the average and the different than what the industry sort of touts. They're looking for human friendly homes and office buildings that don't emit toxic chemicals into the air so the occupants are healthier. So I had to create Degree of Green as a way to allow people to choose what is green, what it means to them. And Degree of Green essentially comes down to 27 different reasons why manufacturers and contractors and marketers will tout the word green. But there's 27 different reasons why it can be green. And we boil them down to three main categories: human friendly, environmentally friendly, and sustainable. And from a contractor's point of view, the sustainable, I think, is the biggest issue. Sustainable, and then after that would be things like energy efficiency.
So what do you mean by sustainable?
What I mean by sustainable would be materials that will not only last longer than what is typical for that product. So the idea of utilizing metal roofing in lieu of asphalt shingles, because metal roofing will last 2 to 3 times longer than asphalt shingles. It may cost more, but in the long run, you're saving because you're not having to remove and replace 2 or 3 times during that same lifespan. I'm also looking at,
Sorry, I want to cut you in there
yeah.
because this is something that's really a big deal, I think,
Mhm.
is that the average, I mean, I've lived in my same house for 35 years, so your argument would make a lot of sense to me. But most people don't live in a house for more than 5 or 6 years, so why would they care about that?
Well, that's a great question. I think that it comes down to number one, is this their um, life ending home? Is this the home they want to live in for the rest of their lives? I'm not talking starter homes. I think that, most people who own a home end up probably selling and moving 2 or 3 times throughout their life. But if this is the home that they're building, or this is the home they see they're going to be in for the rest of their lives, investing in materials that last as long as the home is a smart decision. Number one. Number two, it also increases the resale value of the house. If somebody it can buy a home and the roofing material is going to last as long as they're going to be there, that home has more value.
Yeah, I would think that would make a lot of sense to me.
Mhm.
It just seems that young homeowners, like if when I was 34 or 35 years old when I bought our house, I'm now close to 70. So I've been here for a week or two. But at 35, I'm not sure I would have said, it makes sense for me to buy something that's going to last for 30 or 40 years. But you need to sort of have an argument or a conversation that makes sense to the younger homeowner who may just decide to live for a bunch of years in a particular house.
Right. It's always a tough conversation when dealing with clients that are all over the spectrum of age, income levels, and then their own personal ideals and how they want to live life. But I'm finding that, and I'm 51. I'm finding that new homeowners that are half my age are coming to us with questions about materials that are far different than people who are my age or your age, because their life experiences are different and the way they were raised, it's different. I call them kids today, but those in their mid to late 20s who are probably getting into their first home, they grew up in school environments where they were talking about recyclability and energy and environmental issues. And now, because of the pandemic, everybody's talking about health issues in the house. And so I think it's just what you're used to and what you've been educated on. You know, in my age, your age, it was about what can you afford, and you buy the best that you can afford, but you never stretch beyond your means. The younger generation, I'm finding is that they would rather spend more and stretch themselves on materials they know they're not going to have to replace, and that's not going to harm them or their young kids.
So a lot of, construction work is actually remodeling. You buy a house, we bought our house and then 3 years later we made the house 50% bigger. It was a small house. And
Mhm.
we said, okay, we're going to put a big addition on. And at that time, it probably would have made a lot of sense to talk about, gee, how can we do mold abatement and all the other stuff that, fix the insulation in our attic.
Right.
But our contractor never talked about it.
Yep.
And it seems to me, I'm kind of a niche-aholic. I love it when people take small niches and they make themselves really well known. So if you were to advise a contractor or a subcontractor that does, remodeling or puts additions on the houses, how would you say, gee, this is a really good way to position yourself as being different than all the other bears out there?
That's a great question, Josh, because especially these days, because of the pandemic, and people are now forced to be in their homes more than they ever used to. And believe me, the last 2 years, our remodeling business has just skyrocketed because people are sitting around looking at every corner, every room in their home, saying, I should probably fix that as long as I'm here. I might as well paint this room.
Yeah.
And, but, but now that people are somewhat forced into living in the home while these projects are happening, the question of, well, is it going to harm me, is the most prevalent question now. It is this product going to be safe for me and my family while we're around during that remodeling process? So as a contractor, uh and for us as somebody who supplies contractors, we are getting more and more phone calls from remodeling contractors, remediation contractors saying, my customers are demanding healthier materials. Where do I go to learn more about this? If you are a small contractor, first of all, if you're a small contractor and you're a quality contractor, you're probably booked out 6 to 8 months right now. It's just inevitable.
Or a
Contractors
year
across the
or a year
country
and
are in
a half.
demand.
Yeah,
You
it's a
know,
huge demand right
yeah.
now.
And so, do they need additional work? Well, not right now, but they will. The industry has always been ups and downs. We know this, and so now's the time to plant the seeds. So when these current projects are over with, you've got something that you can harvest. And I had actually a conversation with an individual just a few days ago who is contemplating starting a mold remediation company. And then the conversation came to, well, then who do you recommend to do the rebuild once the remediation's done? They don't have anybody. So they're going to start a firm doing mold remediation, rebuilds, remodeling, because it's all tied in together. And as a homeowner, I want to call one company to do everything. I don't want to have to be the general contractor and hire a mold remediation company and then a carpenter and then a painter and a plasterer and a roofing contractor and a window installer. I want somebody to do it all. And I think as a bit of advice to those small to medium-sized remodeling contractors out there, this is the time to really get involved into all those aspects, incorporating not only healthy building materials, but energy efficiency and sustainable, because this is what the new generation of homeowners are really asking for.
Interesting. So, how much more expensive is it to be green than not green?
Another great
And
question.
I'm not talking about metal roofs
Mhm,
versus asphalt roofs. I'm just talking about, I'm going to build a house and
mhm.
I want to make it green, or I'm going to do an addition and I want to make the addition green.
Right.
So, how much more expensive would that be?
If you were to compare apples to apples, quality level to quality level, there is no difference in price.
Hmm.
The the increase that some people talk about in going to green building materials is the fact that you have to take a look at where the industry was 25 years ago when the first bits of green building materials started coming out into the market. A lot of it didn't perform very well, and because the manufacturers were making sacrifices with quality and longevity to be more eco-friendly. And so a lot of the contractors got sort of burned by that early adoption of green materials, and they said we're never going to use it again because it doesn't work as well. Well, nowadays, green building materials, for the most part, work as well or better than their traditional counterparts. And you and I both know that in most situations, you get what you pay for. And higher quality materials that last longer, that perform better, typically do cost more. So green building materials, unfortunately, are now in that category of they may be more expensive because they last longer, they perform better. So if you were to compare high quality building materials that a custom contractor uses to green building materials, they'll both perform about the same. They'll probably both cost about the same.
That's really cool. So, in Vermont, selling green is not a big deal. I mean,
Right.
this is probably one of the this and Oregon are probably two
Hmm.
green states in the
Sure.
country. So if you go some places where it's traditionally not, new age and groovy, how hard a sale is green?
It's a easier sell to the consumer, a very hard sell to the contractor. And
That's
again, your comparison going to Brattleboro, Vermont, you can throw a dart and you'll hit somebody who's a green building material, or a green builder. In Cleveland, Ohio, or in the middle of Missouri, you will not find green building contractors, but you'll still find people who, if they were offered the choice, would jump to green and healthy building. So it's a matter of getting the industry all over the country to adopt and promote green and healthy materials and methods. And it's really difficult when you have contractors who have been doing the same thing for 20 to 30 years and they're good at what they do and they don't want to change because they don't see there's a need for it. So it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing. And you have to
so.
decide what's a stronger pull.
So is green more difficult to build with than non-green materials?
Green can be more difficult for the sheer fact that the supply chain all across the country is probably the one weak point. And so if you were building, and I've got a client right now who's building in the middle of Missouri, and they can't just run down to the local hardware store or a paint supplier and grab materials for their project because they're building a healthy home. Their contractor has to be more prepared, and they're ordering paints and materials a week ahead of time to be delivered to the job site. So right now, the supply chain, the availability is not the same throughout the country. So there's more planning involved.
So this brings us to a really interesting thing, which you may or may not know about. there's a methodology called SCRUM, which is used in the software development world. And we apply that in the contracting world, and we've moved it over to it. And we typically will take 20 to 40% of the labor cost out of any project we're going to do by the methodology that it does. Well, one of the other things it does is it sort of forces you to look at what your backlog is, and it forces you to look advanced and out in the future for what you're doing. So not only would it make sense for a contractor to do green, which I actually think is a really interesting and underused niche.
Mhm.
You might even call it a blue water strategy. But if you also change the methodology of how you plan and implement jobs, that becomes a non-issue.
Right.
So go ahead. Sorry
Well,
about that.
and I totally agree. The difficulty though is that what I find is that you around the country you do have some builders who are they're not focusing on green per se, but they're using green as part of the attraction of why people will hire their services. These are usually very large builders who are building 1,000 homes a year, and they can say all of our homes are green built. We've got them in Wisconsin, they're in Illinois, they're in all over the country. There are these green builders, but all of their homes are more tract type homes. They're building 1,000 homes, maybe 6 different designs, and there's no customization to it. Then you have the clients who want a truly healthy home, and it's taking green building to the next level. Every one of those homes are custom. They're one-offs. And so it's very difficult to then utilize those methodologies in custom because every situation is different. So they really don't have the ability to be prepared for what the client wants next. And so you go through the process of blueprints and bidding and so forth. By the time you get to actually building the home, it could be 2 years later, and the materials you selected for the project may not be available anymore, or because of the global supply chain issues, they can't find them. And
Right.
so it is a little more difficult. It does require a little more hand holding, and thus the pricing seems to stay up because there is no economies of scale.
So there could be economies of scale if the larger builders decide to do it. They just don't do
Yeah.
it.
They don't do it at this level, and yeah, I think that it is slowly trickling through the industry that making these healthier choices in materials and methods is obviously good for the client. It's great for the people on the job site doing the work because they're not exposed to the toxic chemicals, but they don't see the value proposition yet. They don't get it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because most of these folks are in their 40s, 50s, maybe even 60s,
Mhm.
and it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, as the saying
Exactly.
goes.
Exactly.
At the same time, I'm seeing a lot of people in the construction world who are between 30 and 40 years old. They have
Mhm.
smaller firms. They're thinking a little bit differently about it, but they're still tradesmen or craftspeople who got into the construction world. They used to swing a hammer and they said, "Oh, I can do it better than the guy I work for." They go and they open their own company. They
Yeah.
really know nothing about a business. They know nothing about business formation
Mhm.
and nothing. Do you see any of these folks actually wanting to learn a different way?
Yes. Yes. Uh, I consult with thousands of people in a year, whether it's for 15-minute phone calls or doing full projects. And I think right now I have got 23, 24 homes going up in various stages across the country. Out of all of those projects, I think all but maybe 2 are being built by custom home builders. And these are builders that maybe build a handful of homes every year,
Yep.
and they're used to taking recommendations from clients. The big home builders, they'll give you a choice of 3 different carpet colors and 2 different countertop colors and so forth. The custom home builders are used to having a client that says, "I was on Pinterest and this is the kitchen that I saw and this is what I want." So they're used to having customers that say things like that. They'll take advice when a customer says, "Can we go with some flooring material that doesn't off-gas formaldehyde because my son has autism and formaldehyde exacerbates his symptoms." the custom contractor, the smaller firm, but the craftsman says, "Oh yeah, by all means, I can do that. I'll do that. I'll listen to your consultant." And so they're used to that. The bigger builders, they've got their systems down and they will not change unless there is a financial reason for them to change.
So we have time for one more question. And this is sort of, again, from left field because I often go there. So often in the custom home world, there's architects who design
Mhm.
and there's contractors that build, and sometimes there's an engineer stuck in there. But typically, the architects have one idea and the contractors have a different idea that's all together.
Mhm.
How much of an impediment are architects to getting green stuff actually done?
That's an excellent question, specifically because throughout my career, I've been president of one of the largest architectural associations here in Wisconsin a couple of times. So I think I can speak pretty well on this. Um, Architects are, it's kind of a double-edged sword for them because they have the obvious skill, the training, the ability to draw a home, but sometimes the one thing that they lack is the ability to listen and the ability to hear what the customer really wants. And so they will put their signature on the plan. This, you can tell it's been drawn by so and so because it's got that look. But if a customer says, I want to build healthy, sometimes in their mind, they're hearing, oh, they just want to do green building. And so therefore, we're going to have energy efficiency and some sustainability things, but we're not going to actually build with healthier building materials. So sometimes it can be, um, quite frankly, that brick wall that we have to bust through in order to get the project done correctly. And I've had plenty of projects like that throughout the years where the architect just has one thing in mind and they will not change from that methodology. And it has been difficult, but we can get through it. It's just a matter of them listening, sitting down and listening to what the consultant wants, what the homeowner wants specifically, and we can get through this.
Yeah, I would have loved to have my architect actually listen to what we wanted and not have to have the contractor completely tear everything apart and redo it.
Right.
Hey, Andrew, you're a delightful guest. Thank you so much for being with us. And I'm going to bet, and I hope the contractors listening to this give you a call at least to find out what you can do to help them to niche their business a little bit more and move on to green, which is where we're all going to be in the future, whether we want to or not.
For
So
sure.
how do folks find you? And I assume you're willing to have a conversation?
Definitely. You can find me right at my website, which is thegreendesignCenter.com. And from there, you'll find the materials that we supply, the consulting that I do. I also have my own podcast called Non-Toxic Environments, 3 words. And, but yeah, probably best to go to the website first, thegreendesignCenter.com, and all the information's right there.
Cool. I've got 2 things I'd like you to do. And the first you've heard me do about 10,000 times, or actually 350 times. So I like to exaggerate. And that is wherever you're listening to this podcast, I want you to do 2 things. One, I want you to give us an honest rating review. And 2, I want you to subscribe. So if you do that, I would really appreciate and give us an honest rating and review. Just don't, make it a fluffy one. If you love us, say you love us. If you hate us, you can say that too. I'll only cry a little bit. And then the second thing I want you to do is I wrote a book, my second book actually, it's called The Sale Ready Company. And it's about my fictional manufacturing company where John Aardvark, the patriarch of the company, is now thinking about, gee, it's getting close to time to retirement. How am I going to transfer this thing? And you'll be surprised at all the issues he has to deal with and all the family stuff that goes along with it, including things with his spouse, which we always forget about when we're talking about the transition thing. It's easy to get. I'm actually selling it for half price or almost half price for $7.95 instead of $14.95. And you can get it by going to www.salereadycompany.com. That's www.salereadycompany.com. Pick up the book, get the bonuses, and enjoy the read. Oh, and after you read the book, go to Amazon and leave us a review. It always really helps a lot. Good, bad, indifferent, just leave a review. Hey, this is Josh Patrick. We're with Andrew Pace. You're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. Thanks a lot for stopping by. I hope to see you back here really soon.